Welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil Vaish, founder and CEO of BoostSolo. Today, I'm really excited to introduce a guest who has taken creativity to a whole new level. From designing for Disney to crafting her own entrepreneurial adventure, my next guest is on a mission to celebrate overlooked inventors and inspire the next generation of creators. Launi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to join you today, and anything that I can do to help with the rest of the solo entrepreneurs, like myself, I am really excited to do that. So let's fire away. Let me know what questions you may have.
Sure. Well, thank you. And so let's just get started. So you've had a really impressive career at companies like Disney and Fox before you founded Creative Play. So was there a defining moment that sort of pushed you to step away from the corporate world and start your own venture? Can you tell us about that?
Sure. My career has been awesome for the most part. And just like being anyone else that's been in corporate America, there are definitely, parts of it that are amazing and others that you realize you would like to have more control over in your life. And so I started my career pretty much right out of high school, basically. I ended up really starting my career at Warner Brothers, creating art. I was developing style guide art that if you walk into any Target, you walk around the store and you see any brand, whether it's Superman, Batman, Tweety, Harry Potter, whatever that brand is, the art that goes on there is created by a team of people. And that's where I started my career. And while I was at Warner Brothers, my sales and marketing team started asking me to come in and show their licensees, because I was on the licensing side of the business. We didn't actually manufacture product, to help them take my art and to successfully pick up the DNA of each brand and overlay that onto whatever that existing product was. And I started doing that, and at around my sixth year out of 9, they asked me to oversee Latin America and do creative summits. And I moved to Mexico City. I lived there for 2 years, and it really gave me a global view of product design and creative, but through the lens of culture. And I was at Warner for 9 years, and then I decided to come back to the US, and I ended up going to Disney. It was an amazing time there. It was even more brands for me to learn, even more DNA. And so I loved the job that I had there. But as with many other employees, you get to a place where you've been doing the same thing over and over again for quite some time. And I wanted a challenge. I wasn't feeling challenged anymore. And it's probably what most entrepreneurs feel like. You know that you have more inside of you, but you're within the constraints of a corporation that has their own viewpoint of what, obviously what their brand is. And you're a little bit boxed in. And so I took on a role and I went to Mattel. Mattel was the first time I had an opportunity to really understand the production and manufacturing side of the business. Okay. And I did that for quite some time. It was really great. I worked on Hot Wheels and Barbie, and at Disney, it was, Toy Story and Princess, there's all these different brands. And so it was really awesome. But at Mattel was the first time I ended up in a culture that I wasn't enjoying as much. The stress from the economy, which everyone understands, put it in a place where not only Mattel, but the companies that I had been at previously were doing reorgs almost every year. And so you were constantly in this state of uncertainty and fear and lack of control of your own life. Yeah. And so in that space, I started thinking, I want my own thing. I would like to do what I'm doing for these corporations before myself. And I knew that I could do that. But in 8 months, I hadn't quite figured it out. And I was offered a role at 20th Century Fox. I went over there, worked on The Simpsons and Avatar. And it was the first time I worked on adult brands. And it really helped me to broaden my knowledge, right? So at this point, I'd learned a little bit about legal, marketing, sales, production, manufacturing. And that's one of the benefits of working in a corporate environment, right? You have an opportunity to wear so many different hats and to do so many things and to learn a lot of different things. But 8 months into being at Fox, Disney bought Fox. And I was
Right.
yet in a place where my life was not in my control. And so it was just a reminder that it was time for me. And really, I go back to Disney. It's very familiar and I'm enjoying it. I take on Disney parks. It's even more challenging. I have a larger team. It's really great, but it's not mine. And it was twofold. One, it was the first time that I was given a project where I was working on brands that were really diverse. The people and the
Mhm.
characters were diverse. And I realized that for most of my career, I was the only African American woman in a room. So
Yeah.
most boardrooms, conference room, if you were brown or black, it would normally be me and then maybe one other person. And
Yeah.
I really, inside of me, wanted to start a company where diversity was at its core, that allowed for us to have a business that celebrated people like me. And and so, honestly, my leaving to become an entrepreneur was not from a negative experience. It was
Mhm.
just from a place of knowing it was time to grow, right, and to
Yeah.
expand. And
Yeah.
so that's why I ended up actually walking away from Disney and starting my own company.
Yeah, no, and that's such a common thread that you see. In fact, in my own life, that was the reason I left the corporate world. Is at some point I just felt like my learning curve was going the wrong way, right?
Yes,
And as you said, you'd rather have your own uncertainty to deal with than an uncertainty that you have no control over, right? So I,
absolutely. Yes.
I totally hear you. So you talked about wearing many hats. You talked about your mission. We're going to come back and touch on those things. I think they're really interesting. When you started, what expectations did you have about running your own business, and how did that compare to the reality?
Yeah. So when I started my own business, I knew that I was going to be doing my company alone for the most part. I didn't have a budget for a large team. I needed to invite people in and tell them about what I was going to be doing, what my mission and my vision was, and to actually bring people on that would want to join my team, champion me as I went along. And really, what I started focusing on were my contacts, people around me who had the skill sets that I didn't have.
Right.
I needed someone to help me with marketing. My business. So backing up, so Creative Play is a product and design lab that champions inventors. It illuminates Black women and Black women driven innovation. And we develop products that solve everyday frustrations while celebrating style and fandom. And so, with that being what my company was going to be, I'm going, I don't have a factory. I don't really even know where to start to find a factory. I didn't know about supply chain at the time. I had a product. I knew from the very beginning, I wanted to put out products that I would patent. They needed to be brandable. It's something that I owned. And so with that, I didn't have a patent attorney, a trademark attorney. I mean, there's so many different pieces and parts, right, that comes with setting up a company. And so I started reaching out to my contacts. And what's interesting is I think most people don't know how deep their contact list is. You spent 5 minutes to an hour in a room with someone, you shook hands and you said, we should get together for lunch one day. That was 4 years ago, right? It never happened. And so I
Yeah.
started reaching out and just telling people, hey, I've got this dream for leaving. I need to fill some holes. I don't know how to find a factory. And the more I started telling people what I wanted to do, people would say to me, I know someone who used to do that. Or I know a really good attorney. And even if they're not the right one, they can point you in the right direction. And
Right.
so I started really just pulling people together. That was my first step. My first step was not being shy about what I wanted to do, to boldly step out and to start telling people what it was that I wanted to do. And I believe I was surprised at how much, when people heard what you wanted to do, how much people are willing to help you get where you are trying to get. But it does take you opening your mouth and being a little vulnerable at the fact that you may not be successful your first shot out, but taking those chances was
Yeah,
very critical for me.
I love that. And you did two things, which, a mistake a lot of first timers make is they tend to hire themselves. And also they don't sit down and understand what their weaknesses are, right? And where they need help, and then to ask for it. So I think it was
Yes,
really smart to be vulnerable like that. And then, and you said you sort of got out of the gate faster than you would have if you tried to go and learn how to patent something or go to China and try and find a factory, which, a lot of people might have done. So I think that was,
absolutely. And honestly, even having all of the information that I did, all of the contacts that I managed to drum up, there were still many holes that I
yeah,
had to go into LinkedIn and just type in a keyword of something I was missing and then see, are they a second, a third? Sometimes I would get a first. And I would go, I didn't even know they did that. Do you think you would just do a coffee chat with me? Can I pick your brain? And so, to your point, that kind of stepping out and asking questions, I did a lot of research up front. It was important to do all the things that you didn't know how to do because I didn't go to business school. So, doing a SWOT analysis was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was one of the most painful processes every time I have to do any sort of accounting. Because if you come from a large corporation, there were other people that did all these functions that are now your function, right?
yeah.
Um, but it's something that you will truly appreciate if you put that time aside. You don't have to be an expert at it, but just having a general understanding of how those things work helps you with your conversations later, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. And I think the other thing which I didn't stress enough is just tapping into your own network, right? Because most people assume you have to go and find new people. But your connections and their second and third, like you said, even if they don't do the thing you're looking for, they will most likely know somebody who they know and trust who can help you,
Exactly.
right? And I think people don't do that enough. It's sort of
Absolutely. And
undervalued.
I think it's because many people are um, concerned about looking foolish, right?
Yeah,
And you don't know what you don't know. And no one has an expectation for you to know something you've never done. But we put that upon ourselves. We put these expectations on ourselves and have these conversations with ourselves that no one else is having. And so the faster you get to, uh, I'm going to do this, I might fail, but fail fast, jump back up with my learnings. And I don't even call them failures anymore. I just call them learning. Once I
yeah,
get rid of that word, it's not as scary um, just to take those chances. And it's not even a huge chance, right? It's all they can say is no, or I don't know. And that's
right.
okay.
Right. And you'll figure it out anyway, right? It's a
Absolutely.
good starting point to,
Yeah.
it's a shorter distance, I would say, than, going the other way, which is trying to find someone brand new. So, but that's great. And then I
Absolutely.
want to go back and touch on, sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, no, no.
Okay. I want to touch on your mission again, because I think it's a wonderful mission, and you sort of alluded to it a little bit. Now, you're really passionate, clearly, about celebrating overlooked inventors and promoting diversity in the toy industry. So, how have your personal experiences and values sort of shaped this mission, and how do you ensure it's reflected in your brand identity and your product development? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, interestingly enough, when I walk into the room, any room that I'm in, I show up authentically as myself. And when I show up authentically as myself, which is, in my opinion, everyone's superpower because no one can be me and I can't be anyone else. And so what you show up with will always be unique. One of the things that happens the moment I walk into a room is I'm a Black woman. I can't get rid of that. That's what it is. I love that actually. That's automatic. I don't have to talk about it. I don't really even have to harp on it because this is something you would be accepting the moment you see me, right? And me stepping into who I am and the background that I have is obviously going to be influenced by those two factors in and of itself. So I grew up in a household in Pasadena, California. I come from a mixed background of African American and German. I come from a family of 6 siblings, and I'm the only one that wasn't an entrepreneur, by the way. Everyone else, including my parents, were entrepreneurs. And so I had a certain experience that came from being in the US as an African American woman, and our history has not been all flowers, right? And so not only is our history flawed in that everyone hasn't always been treated equally, but on top of it, there is a continuation of things that just are unjust, right? And so we're
Yeah.
constantly being put in this situation where another news report comes out, and then there's this negative spin on possibly who you are, and you continuing to push forward in spite of those things, which speaks to your resilience just in and of itself, right? But what I started to take away from it is, as I would work in these larger corporations, I would ask my HR departments, can you please send me a diverse pool of candidates? It was nearly impossible. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. I'm like, you couldn't find one brown person? We are like double digits in percentage. So how is that even possible? And one of the things I started realizing is that our community did not go to school for the most part in a lot of the creative fields, especially in what I was doing. Number one, it's hard to even explain to many people what licensing even is. They don't even know what that is. It's
Right.
not being taught in school. I stumbled into it. I didn't know what licensing was. And one of the things I knew I wanted to do is go into schools and start speaking to more diverse pools of young kids that would put us in a position where when the next generation wants to hire um, a staff that is more of a reflection of the world, the pool would actually exist. And right
Right.
now, it just doesn't, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of my driving forces. The other side of that is there are so many inventors that never even got credit for what they did. And so when I started doing research, I was like, Black female inventors, boom. And I'm like, this is impossible. How could this number be so low? And then you start looking at the history. Brown people were not allowed to even take out patents. They weren't allowed to trademark things. And so that isn't the case anymore. But to be able to celebrate what it is that we have brought to our country and the world is important, to actually show our next generation you too can make a living with things that come directly from your brain. You woke up, you had a dream, you then told someone, I know how I can solve this problem, but you have no idea how to bring it to the world. I want to be that help for people to say, okay, I may not know exactly what your field is, but I may be able to introduce you and be the conduit for you to be able to bring those things to life. And so that part is important. I speak at colleges as well. So here in Los Angeles, we have a school called Otis College of Creative and Design. And that school is one where I go in, I review portfolios, I talk to them about what field they want to go into. Is it graphic design? Is it animation? Is it fashion design, gaming design? There's so many options now. But being someone that they can see my face and go, huh, this is possible just by showing up.
Yeah.
I don't even have to talk very much, is enough. And so that's my driving force in that space.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love that. And there were a couple of things you said. One of the things you said which really resonates is I always tell solopreneurs this is you cannot build your brand because you are your brand. The
Right.
day you were born, your brand was built. You cannot
Yeah.
change that, right? And then the
No,
people just fundamentally sometimes don't. So what you need to do is own it, step into it, like you said. So I love that.
absolutely.
And the second thing I agree with you is that you don't think about that, but there is no pool because also they've never seen themselves in those roles, right? Even the
Correct.
outputs have been predominantly not. I mean, very few non-white superheroes. I don't even know one Indian one, for example. So I
Yeah.
think it's a beautiful way to also ensure that there's a legacy now that's more diverse in terms of that, universe. So I think that,
Absolutely. But when you think about from an Indian perspective and you think about how large that film industry is right now, it
yeah,
wasn't that way 20 years ago. And
true.
so it takes someone to step out and say, I'm going to build it. And it doesn't have to be a hit overnight, but little by little, those smaller wins become the bigger win. And so you're a piece of it. You may end up being the driving force behind it. But that goes back to that is your superpower. You being authentically you, that is your superpower. So I completely agree with you on that.
Yeah, and I think that's great. So, what's been the most challenging part of building your brand at Creative Play, and how do you
Yes,
differentiate yourself from entrenched, big spending, players who've been around like Mattel and Disney, and it's a competitive market,
right, right. Well, interestingly enough, it ties back into the first thing we were talking about, which is being authentically yourself, right?
right?
And so when you start really thinking about who you are and what's valuable to you and what you are bringing that is different from anyone else, you'll start to unravel that. So, one of the things when it comes to product design in particular, when you're trying to figure out what you're going to put out into the world, research is the first thing that you do. So
Right,
you're going out into these stores and you're doing a competitive analysis and you're looking to see what's out there and what isn't. So let's say there's something that you want to do and it's just not as great. Well, you're improving on something which automatically is breaking you out of the mold. When
right.
you are doing something that's brand new, to me, that's the best place to be. That's where you're in this place, in this position of there's no one like you. There's nothing like your product that exists. And if there's something similar to your product, it gives you the space to talk about the differences, right? They've also, by the way, been around for over 100 years.
Yes,
So we sit back and I believe, as entrepreneurs have a bad habit of doing is comparing. You can't compare. And by the way, it just slows you down. The thing you want to do is take the things from those successful companies and incorporate that into the rest of your plan, right? Because that is going to help you get there faster. They did all the work. They failed over and over and over again before
yeah,
they were successful. There wouldn't have been a Mickey Mouse if there had not been a failure, right? And as you start looking at, I was doing research recently on Universal Studios and how that studio even came to be. It was failure after failure after failure. But the failure, I used to say all the time, I want to be one of those people that fails up. You see them all the time. You're like, that guy completely ruined that company. They're bankrupt. And then he goes over and they give him a president level job at another company. And you're like, how did they do that? They took the lessons from the last one, they incorporated into where they wanted to go next, and then they were able to turn that into success. It's the same thing I believe with being an entrepreneur. When I first launched my product, I was so excited. I knew I was going to have to put some money towards it. I didn't have a ton of money, but I had to get creative. I had to get
yeah.
creative and break out of what everyone else looked like. Because if you look like what the other company looks like that has a much larger budget, you'll never win, right?
No.
It has to be you doing something that people are like, what the heck is that? You know what I mean? Or like, something that is so disruptive that people, with their very short attention spans, are able to go, oh, I'm interested in that. I want to look at that.
So there will be lots of bumps in the road, and I love how you pointed out that the greatest successes are built on a mountain of failures, right? Like you said about Disney. I mean, even Steve Jobs had more failures than successes, but he's never going to be remembered for those failures. So it's like,
No, he's not.
people
No, he's
tend
not.
to forget that, yeah, that the amount of effort and sort of that pile behind you that no is sort
Yes.
of received into the background. And also,
I
I
think
think
you'll
you're right.
also,
Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was going
Go
to
ahead.
say, I think you'll also be surprised at how many people are like, they say to me all the time, like, I'm so either proud of you or, I aspire to be someone that's willing to take those chances. Most people want to do what we're doing, right? But it's the
Yeah.
ones that don't quit that actually get to the other side. But if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
Yeah.
It's
True.
not, being an entrepreneur is not easy. And so I actually really love what you're doing, because the larger your community, more people that you can speak to. When someone starts to have an issue with Meta or Facebook, they can say, has anyone had a problem? And I can be like, I can tell you all the steps. I can tell you what we went through. And so that's the value in a community like this, right?
Yeah.
Shared
Absolutely.
experience.
And you're right, because and it's a road less traveled. So unless you've actually traveled this road, people don't really understand what it's like to be in it day to day in the trenches, right? So that's one of the reasons why I'm excited about this community, is because, it's industry agnostic. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't matter if you're launching a toy company or a dental practice or a brand, you know, uh, consultancy. I think that
Yeah,
the shared journey, the trials and tribulations is something we can all learn from each other. So I appreciate that.
absolutely.
So now let me switch back a little bit, because the corporate world gets a bad rap, right? I was
Yeah.
glad to sort of hear you say that you had great experiences. You learned a lot. You were a product designer. You understood licensing. You were an executive director. So, you didn't leave it saying, oh my God, I hate that place. It was more about sort of my learning curve is, and you sort of reached an endpoint. But how have those diverse skills that you accumulated during the corporate world sort of helped you develop your brand as an entrepreneur, and how do they help you day to day?
Yeah, I had this conversation early on with someone, and I was telling them one of the most valuable things that has happened in my life was the fact that I was able to work in a corporate environment in the very beginning. And one of the reasons is because, one, you're working with a lot of different people under very stressful circumstances, and you're figuring out how to solve problems. And so there are some soft skills that are very beneficial as you're becoming an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur, because you end up having to talk to a lot of different people to
Yeah.
get where you need to get. The other part is in a corporate environment, there are so many departments. So, as I was stating earlier, although I was in the creative department, I had to work with my legal team, a quality assurance team, my marketing team. There was a sales team. We had a digital team, character art team. There are all these different teams. There was a retail business development team. And over time, you spend time with people. And if you're curious enough to ask questions, there are so many things that I walked away with, knowledge that when I would speak to people, and in all honesty, I didn't know what I was talking about. I was like a parrot. I was repeating things that I had heard in meetings, and people were like, wow, you know so much. They would end up telling me more than anything I was parroting. And so it was very valuable because I actually learned a little bit of everything. The other thing I tell people is, if it's at the beginning of your career, so different from where I am today, in the beginning of my career, I was willing to sleep on the floor for a presentation the next day. We would sleep in the office. We would work till 3 in the morning. All of those things, when you're hungry, you do. And in a corporate environment, I could walk over to another department, which honestly is what opened the doors for me to oversee Latin America. I'm
Yeah.
in a creative position. There were a lot of people in my department, but I was the one that was willing to talk to people in other departments and say, I want to learn about marketing. Show me what it is that you do. They would show me how they would do their creative briefs. They would show me their marketing plans, and how they got there and what was going to differentiate our brand from another brand. These are things I use today. These are
Yeah.
things that open the door for me early on to learn things. And I share with people, no one is going to turn away free labor. If you say, let me shadow you, work with you, I'll file some things for you. I'll make phone calls for you. Something that doesn't, no one wants burnout, but if there's something you can do that puts you in a position to learn something that could be valuable for the company that you want to build, do
Yeah.
it, especially while you're getting a paycheck. Because I tell you, being on the other side where a paycheck is not coming on for me and my companies, I was paid every week. Can you imagine how jarring it is to go from a check showing up every Thursday to like, oh man, I really got to work for a check to show up this Thursday. And so while you're at a company and you're getting paid, take advantage and go to every department you can, because who's in a rush? While you have a job, you're not in a rush. If we're talking to potential entrepreneurs that want to do this and you're in a company right now, I don't care if you work at McDonald's, there are people in every different division that will allow for you to come and work with them, shadow them, go to their meetings, take notes, whatever that is, that will be so valuable for your company, when you get ready to launch.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And like you said, you learn on someone else's dime, and you learn from people who spend a lifetime doing what their expertise, their domain expertise. And I,
Absolutely. And by the way, when you finally do leave, they then, because you've developed a relationship with them, will possibly do work for you because they
yeah,
still have a job. And what does it hurt them? They're still getting a paycheck. So sure, what do you need help with? I need you to help me write a brand plan. Okay. That's like someone asking me to design a project for them. I could do that in my sleep, right?
right.
So if
Yeah,
you are someone that needs that assistance, we can barter. We can come up with ways where I can help you and you can help me. So yeah.
yeah.
I'm
Again,
sorry
great
I
advice.
kept saying.
To tap into your network. That's another, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's another way. And I'm in fact, people are shocked because young people tell me they want to start their own company, and I tell them go work for someone first, and they look at me like, what do you mean? And it's exactly what you just described. It's like you can, there's so much you can learn, and so many advantages to doing that before you start your own thing. And when you're young, you have a lot of time, so you don't have to be in a hurry. So now let me ask you a little bit about, you've spent pretty much your whole career of being around sort of like this world of play and imagination, right? So how has
Yeah.
that influenced your business perspective, and also how do you tap into that playful spirit, if I may, in your own work and leadership?
Yeah. So the main thing is that I wanted to put out a product that allowed for people to celebrate their fandom, show who they are, because the field that I come from is creative. And
Yeah,
so it has greatly influenced the types of products I want to put out there. I want to bring the same smiles to their face as I did when I was working for my larger corporations, but within my own brand now. And
yeah,
so from a creative perspective, as I'm working on whatever that product is going to be, the very first product that I came out with is called Claspies, and I'm actually wearing a couple of them. They are patented apparel accessories that really hang off of any string, whether it's a drawstring or your hoodie or whatever. But what it allows for you to do, because it's brandable, is you can put anything on it, right?
right,
That automatically puts me in a position where if I love a sports team, or if I love, a licensed property that's for girls or boys or men or women, that I can showcase and share my fandom with people around me, because I'm so much about celebrating who I am and
yeah,
who people are in general. It was the perfect alignment for me with my mission and my vision. And so
right,
for the first product to come out, it needed to be a reflection of that. It is easier for me to talk about something that I'm passionate about than it would be if I was just selling a product. I'm selling me through my product to a certain
right,
extent, because what I put out there has a little bit of me in everything that I put out there. It has a little bit of what I truly value and believe in the products that I put out there. And because my company isn't a company that's only developing one product. We're a product lab. So we're constantly patenting new products that will continue to go out into the market. But it's always going to have the same basis around
Right.
having a product that you own, that you can patent, that is brandable, and hopefully something that solves an everyday problem. Because that's what I enjoy.
And you did mention earlier you also do the research, right? So it's really the marrying of those two things. You're bringing your passion, your creativity, and yourself to solving a problem, everyday problem, like you said. And I love that because you have to balance creativity in business. It can't just all be, I love doing this, so we're going to go do it. You got to still find the problem you're solving with your passion. So I think
On
that's
top
really
of it, what is going to help a great deal from you being frustrated, spending an excessive amount of money, pulling your hair out? Because I've spent money in places where I'm like, I would have done it differently, right? Well, of course you would have done it differently. How else will you learn how not to do something unless you do it and it's not optimal?
you talked about going out and getting investments. So let me ask you now, sort of thinking about the future. Where do you want Creative Play to be, say, 5 years from now? And what steps are you taking to get there now?
Yeah, so Creative Play has been set up in such a way that each one of my products, the first one being Class B's, is its own individual company. And so I want to continue to put out products, grow those brands, and then eventually sell each one of those brands. I am not precious about anything that I create because at the end of the day, I wanted to go into the world. I wanted to go to the broadest amount of people and to impact as many people as possible. And so the way I've set my company up is that Creative Play is my company forever. I have no intention of ever selling my company. It's an extension of myself. But the things that I create under that company, I have spent the time with my attorneys, building out the business plans, building the websites, and doing everything to set up my companies so that as I have investors or companies that come to me and they're like, I'm an apparel company and I want to purchase Class B's for this amount, I can pick that up and move it right over.
So is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
For me, I think the biggest thing I would say, which I just answered before, was really understanding your why it is that you want to start your company, especially if you're coming from a corporate space and you're getting a paycheck, which is taking care of all of your needs and supporting yourself and your family. If you're leaving, that's going to end up being your North Star. When things get really tough, you've got to have a really good reason. Like, why are you why are you putting yourself through all of this work? Because those large corporations had to go through everything you're going to have to go through in order to establish yourself to be successful, which means it's not going to be an easy road. And so you're going to need that thing that when you're laying in bed going, oh God, like this is so difficult, you need to be able to look at your phone or your book and it says, the reason why I'm doing this is because I want to celebrate people that look like me. It is critical to me. I want to make sure that people can express themselves and to show outwardly what they feel on the inside. It's a driving factor for me that is outside of myself, right? It is something that's inside of me that I want to bring outward. So I would say find your why, like big time. Write it down, write 20 things and then cull it down to 10 and cull it down to 5 until you have your top 3 or whatever driving force. I would say the other thing is create your own lane. Honestly, I did it all throughout my career and I'm doing it with my own company. There's no one that's you. There's no one that thinks like you. There's no one that can be you. Be yourself and develop whatever that thing is that no one else has done before, because there's less people in a lane where there's no one else. If it's just you and you create something new, then you're just competing against yourself. And I'd rather compete against myself than 50 other companies, right? It also
Yeah.
allows me to separate myself. And then I think the last thing I would say is give yourself grace. I know it's
Mhm.
one of these statements that people say, like when you go to therapy or whatever, like be kind to yourself. Okay. What that means is you're going to make mistakes and you're not going to get it right in the beginning. And wasting time beating yourself up about something you could not have possibly known until you've done it is a waste of time and energy. And so, what I've learned, because I did a lot of it, beating myself up and God, how did I miss that? And waste of time. Because then when you get on the other side of it and you finally pick yourself up and you keep moving forward, and then you're able to succeed and get past that thing, you'll realize I wasted time in an area that there's nothing I could have done anything about. It's in the past.
Yeah.
Those would be probably my top three.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I love the not just finding your why, but writing it down and putting it in your pocket, right? So you can actually pull it out on those hard days because we all have them and we will continue to have them. So I
Absolutely.
agree.
Yeah.
So I love to end the podcast with a little rapid fire round. So I'm just going to throw a couple of questions at you and tell me whatever comes to your mind, right? So you ready to go?
Okay.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
if you, and obviously I have to touch on the toys. If your career was a toy, what would it be and why?
The first thing I think about is probably something like it's more like a collectible. It would probably be like a Funko Pop. And I think one of the reasons why is because a Funko Pop has a basic shape to it. The
Hmm.
foundation of it is solid and it never really changes. The only thing that changes is what's on the outside. So it can go from being a bear to a cat to Superman to whatever, just based on the skin that you change on the outside. And so if I'm able to be that level of flexible and changeable, that to me is probably what would make me the most powerful. And not to be so stuck in one place. Yeah, I think that would be the toy. Something
That
which interestingly enough is basically my first product. Even though it's an apparel accessory, it's very similar to a Funko Pop where I can constantly change what's on the outside. So yeah, yeah,
adaptability as a great skill for a solopreneur. So,
yeah.
what's the most unconventional source of inspiration you've used for product design?
Hmm, most unconventional. I would say I've worked in every different category of product design. And I have worked in very unsexy places like automobiles, parts, and sporting goods and balls and things like that. And what I find is that if you put people first, when you're thinking about bringing something to people that makes them happy or solves a problem, then it doesn't really matter where your inspiration is coming from or what space that you're in. It's
Hmm.
honestly about putting the customer first.
That's
Yeah.
great. If you could add one subject to every business school's curriculum based on your experience, what would you add?
Authenticity.
That's
I
a good
would
one.
add finding the power in being your own self, right? That's what
Yeah.
I would add because people all end up at the same place. They realize that their superpower is them being authentically themselves and not shape shifting. Because when you shape shift, people will buy into a version of you that's not real. And
Yeah.
then when you try to be yourself later, people are like, who is that? It's much easier to allow for people to see who you are from the very beginning and to really want to champion the real you, not the fake version that you've made up, which, by the way, normally looks like someone else. So they're actually not even championing you, they're celebrating the person that you're copying,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So that's what I would add.
Yeah, that's great. And I think forget business school. That would be great in any school curriculum.
Yeah.
So, what's the most surprising lesson you've learned through children through your work in the toy industry?
The most surprising thing I've learned is that you have absolutely no idea what children are going to do. When I first I did my very first photo shoot for my product, And we had, I believe it was over 20 models. And we had all of these kids. And I took my products and I put them out on the table. And when I developed my product has a utility patent. And my utility patent is around the function of when you squeeze the buttons on the sides, it slides up and down, but then it holds it in place, right? It
Right.
securely keeps it from moving. When I got the patent, the whole purpose to me was I want to make a product that keeps your drawstrings from going into your clothing if you put it in the wash. Amazing. I got in a room with kids, they don't care.
Yeah.
Not only do they not care about the functionality, but the fact that I thought they were just going to put it on hoodies was absolutely not what they did. They put it in their hair. They put it on their sneakers. They put it on anything that had a string. And because of the ability to be flexible, what an amazing way to broaden your audience. Me not being stuck in the concept of, no, my product or whatever the thing my vision was is only one thing will keep you from actually broadening your consumer base.
And I think there's a business idea there. Solopreneurs sharing their business plans with 5-year-olds to get feedback. I
Yes.
think that's the way to go.
I'll
Way to
tell you this much, they'll always be very honest. So you better
Yeah,
have thick skin.
that's what I mean, but that's a good thing. So, what's your go to activity to spark creativity and innovation? Do you have one? That's something you do? Or,
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's normally going out to the stores.
okay. Yeah.
For me, it's going out where people are, and it's me walking around and either one, seeing what's in the market, what's been in the market, and looking for ways that I can innovate in spaces where there's been no innovation. This particular space that I went into probably hasn't had anything new or any new innovation in over 50 years, if not more,
Wow.
because things happen. Someone made a tire and then you stay on those tires forever. Then someone said, I'm going to make tires that you can take in the snow, right? They created that new demand. But if you're not out there looking for like what problem can you solve? And sometimes it's just bringing happiness. Sometimes it's really solving everyday problems. I find a lot of inspiration when Toys R Us was a big thing. I literally could just walk in and watch kids. They would just pull bikes down. They would put helmets on, even though they weren't riding bikes, and you're like, why are they putting a helmet on? They're not even outside. That's enough for you to spark your brain like, what if I make something that almost is like a helmet? It doesn't keep them, it doesn't need to protect their brain, but it allows for them to see now I'm giving away something for free because I haven't thought about this. But like, you know, that to me is how you go down that rabbit hole of inspiration and imagination
Yeah, I
is
think that
placing yourself in places where you can just look around and observe and see what people are doing.
that's great. And it's a lovely way to end, to tap into your inner child. I think all of us need to do more of that, right? So, Launi, it's
Absolutely.
been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on the show and for sharing all of that great wisdom. And I wish you
Absolutely.
all the luck with creative play.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on. And, if your community for a solopreneur has any questions, you guys feel free to send them my way. I'm really excited to be a
Thank you.
part of this group.
I appreciate that.